So, StevenD here from Pure 24/7 Radio, and today I am joined by two brilliant people to talk about Street Angels and 20 years of Street Angels, which is very exciting. So, Paul Blakey, you've been here on the station before talking about what Street Angels, Rock Angels all is. Could you tell us what it is?
So, in a nutshell, Street Angels are safe people who patrol town and city centres across the UK and beyond, as we're going to hear today from Sarah, who's heads up our Magaluf project, set up in 2005 as a response to Halifax, which in the day was known as the Wild West of West Yorkshire. So Friday and Saturday nights were fairly out of control in terms of binge drinking, sexual assaults, violence, underage drinking. And we as the church thought, is there anything that we can do to solve some of the issues, particularly around those who are or could become vulnerable within this whole nighttime economy? So we set up this thing that went from a safe place drop-in to patrolling the streets, simply because so many people turned up on our first night. Street Angels was born on the 25th of November 2005, and here we are 20 years later with over 100 projects, working on the streets, at festivals, within communities, around train stations, with the homeless community, in all sorts of different and varied ways that just impacts our communities to bring about change.
Excellent. And I love hearing all about those sorts of things, those sorts of projects that are seeing a problem and trying to fix it. So, where do you come into all this, Sarah? What's your role?
Okay, so we head up Street Angels in Magaluf, and that's in Mallorca, Spain. And my husband and I have been doing that for nearly 10 years now. So when we first came over to Mallorca, my husband and I, we were really looking for where God wanted us to be. And we went on a 2-week mission. So we went with a group called 24/7 Prayer, and they then were working with Street Angels at the same time. So we went out on the first night with Street Angels, and at that time it was ran by a couple called Cameron and Abby, and they were looking to go back to Scotland. And they saw Gary and I, my husband and I, working with Street Angels, and I think they just kind of connected with us, and they really felt like God was saying to them, this is the couple that you need to run this organization. And we obviously prayed about it. I mean, we went out in 2015 for a 2-week mission, and I never expected to come back and live here. So the year after, so we took a year to pray about it, and we really felt God was speaking through that to run Street Angels while Cameron and Abby went back to Scotland. So yeah, it was a big change of life, and like what Paul says, the Magaluf is probably pretty similar in the sense that people come out for their rite of passage, as it were. Like for young people, they often come over. The drinks side of it, so the measurements are a bit different to the UK. So people often think they've had their drinks spiked, etc. But quite often it's just somebody being drunk or like lost, or they've lost their phone, or they feel just very vulnerable. And it's literally coming around people who are feeling that way, and being abroad as well, and being young. That can obviously have an additional effect because you don't know your surroundings. So that's what we do, and that we do that during the summer months. So we work from June till about August.
Wow. So yeah, a lot of problems out there. People, rite of passage, as you put it, people trying to do all sorts of stuff and then end up in a bit of an issue. And then you're able to come and help and support them, starting in Halifax and now also a place in Spain, really going far and wide, which is absolutely brilliant. So Paul, this has come to 20 years. I imagine 20 years, there's been some ups and downs. How have you got to 20 years of Street Angels?
That's a very good question. Sometimes I'm not too sure. It still surprises me when, this simple idea that we had just to solve some of the issues in Halifax back in 2005, and obviously violent crime and antisocial behaviour reduced by 42% in our first 12 months, which kind of then became the catalyst really for the police to go to churches in their local areas and say, hey, they've got this in Halifax, it works, violent crime is coming down. Why aren't you doing it here? So it's kind of become this unintentional network of projects as we replicated the model just kind of growing the model, letting local areas develop it in ways that they wanted to, because of course every local community is so different to the next local community, and the growth still continues to amaze me. We lost a few projects during COVID, as either the night time of the town or the city centres changed and pubs and clubs closed down, or didn't reopen again after the restrictions. Young people also not quite into drinking as they were 20 years ago. So 20 years ago, we would regularly have 8,000 to 12,000 people out in Halifax Town Centre every Friday or Saturday, and towns and cities across the country reported similar numbers. Nowadays, young people are into much healthier lifestyles, don't go out drinking as much. Of course, they've all got phone contracts that they need to pay for, and the latest technology and all of that stuff. And of course, the cost of living has gone up as well. So we've seen radical changes. But I think with having our flexible local approach that says, you know your town far better than we do, just get on with it, has helped us kind of ride that wave. So some projects have come and gone, new projects are starting, but it's always amazing to kind of see the change that happens in communities. And often that change is down to the fact that the church and the community are working together, they're praying together, putting that prayer into action to bring about change on our streets. And I remember I went across for the first weekend in Magaluf, probably back in about 2012, 2013. It was May, it was late May, so it was very early on in the season, and nothing that I'd seen in Halifax compared to the madness that was Magaluf. But I think there's been a real change in that community now. And part of that change is because the church is there, actively working and praying for that community, seeing lives change, but also more importantly, seeing communities changed. And that not only happens in Magaluf, but that's happened in towns and cities across the UK and other countries where we've planted street angels.
That's amazing. 20 years, been going strong. And as you say, there's lots of needs for it, basically, isn't it? Lots of different areas need this. You're able to provide it. And so it just sustains itself, because if it's needed, it grows and develops from there, which is amazing. So I was hoping to ask both of you where a story perhaps where it really inspires what you're doing, something that you've seen or witnessed that might have really just shown you, yeah, this is why we do what we do. So I want to start with you, Sarah. Would you be able to share a story that you've seen or witnessed and thought, this is why we do what we do?
Yeah. Oh, there's quite a few I could share with you. I think one of the funniest stories I have is we work in teams roughly around 3. So we patrol, like Paul said, we patrol the area. And Magaluf is a really small area. It's just very condensed with the bars. So I get a call from one of my co-workers, and she said, oh, we found this guy. He's completely naked. He's got nothing, no belongings. He's really upset. Do you have any clothes? And at the time we were running a cafe, and I had some printed T-shirts. And I said, oh, I've got some T-shirts, but obviously that would only cover the top half of him. So she said, don't worry. I think I've got a plan. So I started walking around trying to find her, and then I see her in the corner, like talking to some guys who pick up the garbage, because it's got to about 6 o'clock, and they start bringing the guys around where they literally clean the streets of all the rubbish. And I can see her talking to them, and she's pulling out this long dustbin bag. And the next minute, I see this guy, like a really big guy. He's like at least 6 foot, and he's quite wide as well. And he's covered in this. He's just put on this big garbage liner, and he looks like Fred Flintstone. So I was sort of taken aback by it all. But I just found it was a really funny story, because it was innovative. Like, it was a really sad situation. He'd had all his stuff stolen, and he was really upset. But he walked around, and we were finishing up anyway for the night. So we went back to the cafe, and we usually used to debrief at the cafe. And we spent some time worshipping, and he wasn't a Christian, and there was maybe about 15 of us. And then one of the guys said, look, where are you staying? He said, I'm staying in Arenelle, which is quite far away from Magaluf. And he said, look, I'll take you back. And he was so touched, and he sat there and listened, and we all prayed out loud, and he was just in the presence of God. And I remember him saying, I've never spent a night like this. This is incredible. So just to be able to have been a part of that experience, even though it was really funny and sad at the same time, but he actually felt really included. And I think he went away like a changed person. Like most of our stories, we never really know what happens to them. But just that interaction that you have with people, or people will say to you, I've never felt like this, I've never told anybody this. You have these amazing conversations when you walk people back to their hotels. They will literally sometimes just literally break down and they'll tell you their story. Um, I remember another guy who had a 3-year-old daughter that had died, and he'd not been able to speak about it at all. And he was on his 40th birthday, and he, his friends were just telling him to come out, just enjoy yourself, forget about it, and of course all he wanted to do was grieve his daughter, but he was sort of caught in this moment. And I remember sitting down with him on a bench, and he was like literally in floods of tears, saying to me, how if you believe in God, how did he let this happen? And it's a really hard question to answer, and I actually was honest, and I said, look, I don't know, I don't know why God allowed this to happen, but I do know a God that loves you. And we were able to share the gospel with him, and I think he felt better when he left. He got a cab, and he was really grateful. Lots of people we meet are really grateful that we take them back to their hotels. And yeah, like I said, that it's often a chance to really hear their story. And their stories are really broken. They are often running away from something. They come on a holiday, they expect it to be great. And on the whole, most people have a great time in Magaluf. But there are people who are left by the by-side, and they then end up conversing with you or feeling very vulnerable with you. And it's a privilege to be able to stand there and listen. And even if it's for 5-10 minutes, whatever it is, just the fact that they've been able to offload and not felt judged by it at all, it is a privilege. And yeah, I've got lots of stories I could tell you, but those are the two that really stuck out for me today.
Well, that's amazing. Yeah, lots of great stories. I'm not sure if you can top that there, Paul.
I don't think I can. I mean, like Sarah, I think all of our projects, the fact that we are there to listen. I remember the early days of Halifax, and we used to have a fairly mature volunteer who would come in and volunteer with us from 9 till about 1 a.m. Then he'd go off to the Samaritans in Halifax to go and do his Samaritan shift. And I don't think he probably went on patrol a handful of times, because most of his time he would just sit in our cafe, and young people would come and just chat to him and pour out all of their problems. So it was almost mirroring his Samaritan shift in person in our cafe. And I remember this one young lad, ex-army, came in quite, as ex-army often are, quite bravado, give us a coffee type thing. So we made him a coffee. He then sat down and started talking to this chap, Alan. And 2 hours later, he left having poured out his heart. He'd got PTSD. He'd seen lots of things happen in the army, some quite horrendous stuff. And he just felt safe and in that spot and in that position with a coffee in his hand, a nice, warm, safe cafe. And a gentleman who was prepared to just sit and simply listen to pour out his heart. And he went on his way 2 hours later, just in a much better place because of that space that he'd given. And I think that's one of the beautiful things with Street Angels. There was a saying, one of the Liverpool newspapers picked up about the Birkenhead project, and the reporter had been out with them, and it says, Street Angels listen to those that people don't normally want to hear. I think that's a beautiful saying, that we go out onto the streets and we are prepared to just stand and listen to the ones that normally people don't want to hear, whether that's people with PTSD, people like that chap with a 3-year-old, whether it's people within the homeless community, people who have a bit too much to drink and therefore they just start to blab and tell you everything when they've had a few pints down them. Whatever the situation, we're prepared to stand there and just be that listening ear and help people to move on in life, hopefully in a better place than they were before they started talking to us.
That's amazing. As you say, that's a brilliant quote. Listening to people who people don't normally want to hear. I love that. That's brilliant. And I think that's a pretty good place to end this interview. Thank you so much for joining me, Paul Blakey and Sarah. It's been an absolute pleasure chatting with you, talking about Street Angels. There's going to be another segment to this, another part to this series, looking at Street Angels. We celebrate 20 years. So thank you so much, Sarah and Paul.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.